Part 4. Waking Pavlov's Dog. The hot water rolled over my breasts while I inhaled the scent of fresh coffee from the kitchen. I had wanted another Guinness, but William's insistence on coffee sounded too good to argue. It was 3 in the morning, and I was just a little over half done with this. I needed to stay sharp. I dug the stress and raw tears from my eyes. Almost done, I whispered and sighed. I killed the water, run the excess from my hair, and enjoyed the steam for a moment before stepping out onto the plush rug. A minute later, I had patted myself dry, towel dried my hair, and had slipped into my most comfortable pair of gray lounge pants and a sage green tank top that slimmed my body. After brushing my hair with my hands a few times, I exited the bathroom with a billowing cloud of steam that caught William's eyes as he poured 2 cups of coffee. "Feel better?" he asked. I nodded and accepted a cup from him. "Black?" he asked. I shook my head and grabbed the creamer out of the fridge. I never drink it black. Taking a sip from his own cup, he returned to his place at the table. He'd already changed out the batteries to the recorder and was stuffing the dead pair into his bag by the time I had added 2 teaspoons of sugar to my coffee and joined him at the table. "So," he began, "September 11th. You met Richard and—" He trailed off, encouraging me to continue where we had left off before my shower. I sipped the coffee and sank back into my chair, pulling the blanket back into my lap. "I spoke to Scott the next day," I said. I complained, reminded him that for 5 years he'd promised to spend Christmas and Thanksgiving with me, then never did. With the holidays around the corner, I told him if he wasn't there for Christmas and Thanksgiving, we were done. That year there was no excuse. He assured me he would be there and agreed to my terms. I went all out, planned a homemade dinner, bought a fresh turkey and fixings. "He didn't show, did he?" William said. I shook my head. "He didn't show," I said. "He had a friend of his call that morning an hour before I was expecting him with an excuse that he was in the hospital. I wasn't surprised, and certainly didn't let it get the best of me. I happily ate my first Thanksgiving alone with Tribble." By that point, I was impassive to the world. I had learned to expect nothing from anyone, and I don't to this day. No expectations from anyone at all. I think that has worked out well for me. I don't get upset if people don't do what I want them to do, because I never expect them to do anything. Unless they are deliberately mean, people don't get to me. I don't care that he didn't make it for Thanksgiving. A part of me said, okay, there's always Christmas. But I knew he wouldn't show. I didn't even make plans for the solstice. Instead, I dove into my logic. I was putting together an argument that finally would set me free. I was dancing and still not eating. If I purchased anything but fresh produce, Scott reprimanded me, and I had hell to pay. I also hated to cook, so I went without. I still spent most of the spare time volunteering at the cat shelter. At work, attention for the populace flowed in. My affectionate, sunny, and, how do you say, honest disposition earned me a plethora of male friends, all of whom made their own affections very clear. But I had other problems brewing. Despite my smiles and contagious disposition, I was terrified of men. When I felt one draw close, I smiled and flirted as a means to defend. A happy male wouldn't hurt me. An angry male would. A sexually appeased male was safe. And so I appeased. They would draw close, I would flirt. They would interpret my defensive maneuver as an invitation, justifiably so, and I would reciprocate accordingly. It didn't take long before they began making their moves, and sex was almost inevitably around the corner. Fortunately, the dance I had rehearsed with Hosea taught me how to keep them dancing without delivery. I failed once before Richard moved in, and sent the rest on their way. On the surface, I smiled, while underneath I screamed, and no one was the wiser. Christmas approached, came, and slipped by quietly without a word about the holiday between Scott and I. There had been no visit even discussed, and I counted the relationship between Scott and I as over, terminated by the conditions in which we agreed upon in our verbal contract. But I had one more battle that was closing in, one more fight to win if I was going to be rid of him. My phone rang. I didn't answer. For 5 years I had been a slave to that phone, hating every second that I had to be chained to it. To this day I detest answering my phone. I will miss appointments before I answer my phone. It rang again. I glared at it. I knew it was him. Knew he was waiting on the other end to slander me, reprimand me, and scold me for not answering for the last 2 days. I drew in a deep breath, braced for the impact, and answered. "Hello? Where the fuck have you been?" Did I really have to answer him? "Busy," I said. "Busy?" And just like that, it was my turn. My turn to sit there and listen to him talk. My turn to hear his rants, his judgment, his abuse. My turn to sit and wait with an ever-growing smile as I clicked the final piece of the final argument into place. I listened to him quote back the same crap my father said. He called me selfish, called me abusive, insisted I was obsessed with money, a gold digger and a taker. The lifetime of abuse had hardened me for this, and his insults ricocheted off of my smile. He performed from atop his soapbox while I grinned and waited, just as he had shown me. "Well," he said at last. I heard him huffing, quite winded from his rant. I shrugged and answered only one thing, one basic lesson I learned all the way back on that first day. "That is your opinion, isn't it?" I replied. Another round of screams and insults came at me. I smiled, not even listening anymore. It was over. No matter what he said to me, no matter the argument, I was home free. He could never touch me again. This time I laughed, openly laughed in delight to my revelation inside and out. He screamed again, demanding an answer. This time I had one. "Everything you say to me, everything you argue is all a matter of perspective. Every opinion you form, even the facts you cite, they are all subjective and adherent to one basic truth, that the conclusions you have drawn are only true from your perspective. Where you stand, your conclusion may be the case, but from where I stand," I shook my head smiling, "from my perspective your premises are false and therefore your conclusion is false." I know he felt his power over me slipping. I was on a roll and didn't dare stop. He tried to argue. "It doesn't matter what you say," I said. I almost laughed again. "None of it matters, because at the end of the day you can only report on your perspective and I on mine." He made a noise like he was trying to interrupt, but I was way ahead of him. I had the control. Where he was angry and vile, I was calm and relaxed. I flowed through the argument with a cool precision, hardened by the logic he taught me. "From where I'm standing, none of it matters anymore, and I have done nothing wrong," I said. "From my perspective, everything you say to me will forever be in question because we do not share the same perspective. I must make my own decisions, my own assessments from here. Only my perspective matters, no one else's. Only I can gather the premise I need from my point of view. Only I decide for me, and your opinion no longer matters." He tried to throw commitment at me, and the music career. He threatened to drive up and take my books. For the first time in my life, I knew I could get my own. "To thine own self be true," I said, and hung up the phone.